All
Thanks.
right.
Looking forward to it. I've had, I think, the King Street Artist Blend, I want to say, which was really nice. I enjoy that one.
Oh, great. Yeah, the Artist Blend it's fantastic. The Glasgow Blend, if you haven't tried that one before, it's sherry and peat. So bigger, bolder. I like to think Artist Blend is summertime and Glasgow Blend more of a wintertime whiskey in general. But both line price and even if I didn't work for the company, I'd still buy those whiskeys because, I mean, dollar for dollar, they're about as good as any whiskey out there, quality-wise. I firmly believe that. Even if I didn't work for Compass Box, I would say that.
I ran across the Artist Blend in an advent calendar I had, and it was great. I went out and found a bottle, and it was $30-something. I'm like, great.
And so Glasgow Blend's the same price, and won best blended Scotch no age statement at San Francisco Spirits Competition this year, which is one of the biggest in the world. And to put that in context, it was won last year by a $350 bottle of whiskey. We just won it for a $37 bottle of whiskey. So
nice.
Yeah, I'd say that. I mean, they're very, very different, but they're both, for the price point, fantastic. Really.
Right. I'll have to grab a bottle like Glasgow.
So all right, y'all. Yeah, it looks like we're at 6:08. I haven't gotten any text or calls from people, so I think we're set for now. So we can get started. So yeah, again, appreciate everybody coming out on a Friday night. Hanging out with us in your homes. And this is just going to be, I'm excited about this. This is Compass Box. This is a really cool blended whiskey company. They're very artisanal with how they do it and what they practice. And Scott Ellis is joining us tonight. He is their ambassador, so he can talk a little bit more he has a little bit more information about the company than I do. So Scott, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for Jeremy for putting this on, man. It's been it's been a funny 18 months. This is about the best way I get to see people these days. So I enjoy doing these events. It's fun to connect with people this way. So
for sure, yeah.
So we ready to get started?
Let's get to it.
All right, great. So firstly, thank you everyone for joining us and for interest in Compass Box. So before we get into tasting the whiskeys and everything, I just kind of want to go over the backstory of Compass Box because it really does explain why we do the things we do, because we are a very unique whiskey company. So going all the way back, so we were founded in the year 2000 by an American by the name of John Glazer. Now, John's from Minnesota originally, and John, his background is actually in the wine industry. And then in the mid-90s, he got hired as a marketing person on this higher end, this little brand you might have heard of called Johnny Walker. But John was hired as a marketing guy for like the higher end blends, like the Johnny Blue and those types of things. And John worked for Johnny Walker for 5 years. And during this time, he fell in love with Scotch whiskey. He managed to travel all over Scotland, visit distilleries and taste whiskeys with the master distillers and so forth. He will tell you that his light bulb moment was when he was drinking Talisker 25 at the distillery with the master distiller. And that's when he decided, man, I love this stuff. But John always wanted to make something. He wanted to be a winemaker coming out of college, and that didn't happen. But now he got to play in the Scotch world. So John basically became an amateur blender at home. And he would make small parcels of whiskey and give bottles out to friends. He'd just make these little blends at home that he thought, were interesting and slightly different, unique, and give them out as Christmas presents, birthday presents, what have you, stuff like this. So after working there for about 5 years, working for the corporate behemoth, John kind of wanted to do something a little bit more niche and really pursue his passion. So he went to Diageo, actually pitched them the idea about starting this craft blending division. Diageo is the parent company of Johnny Walker. It's the biggest spirits company in the world. And so anyway, the guys that John met with, they said, like, John, this is actually a really, really good idea, but it's not right for us. We make hundreds of thousands of cases, and you're talking about making hundreds of bottles of whiskey and so forth like this. But we think it's a great idea, and you absolutely have our blessing. So John quit that job, and by this time he'd been moved over to London, and he basically quit that job and started Compass Box off his kitchen table in London. And this is back in the year 2000. So if any of you were drinking whiskey back 20 odd years ago, you'll know the whiskey landscape is just 180 degrees what it is today. I mean, there was the same bottles that people have been making for the same 20 years. There was very little innovation, nothing new, no new companies coming through. Nowadays, we're in the golden age of whiskey right now. I mean, there have probably been 3 whiskeys released since I started talking right now, and chances are they're very good whiskeys as well. But 20 years ago, it was the polar opposite of this. So because John basically, he didn't come from the Scotch industry, he came from outside. And so he had this perspective on it. It was like, well, the Scotch industry is very tradition oriented. This is the way we've done it. This is the way we're going to continue doing it. But John, being a wine guy, an American wine guy, was like, well, why does it have to be this way? Why can't we do it this way? And so the idea behind Compass Box was to basically create this boutique blending house and just pursue unique flavor profiles of Scotch whiskey and try and bring some interest and excitement back into the category. And I mean, as I say, 20 years ago, just whiskey in general was pretty much in the doldrums, but blended Scotch was at the bottom of that pile of doldrums. I mean, it was about as generic and boring as you could possibly get. So, John was like, well, let's inject some excitement into this. So that's how Compass Box started. We started out as a one-man band company back in 2000. I think we hired our first employee back in 2004. So for the first 3 or 4 years of the company, it was literally John Glazer walking around London with bottles of whiskey in his backpack and literally delivering the whiskey, a case of whiskey to a bar or something like this himself. Or maybe coming over to the US and, sleeping on some friends' couches while he went around and visited camps and so forth like that. But the word got out, the word started rolling that there was this guy doing something new and unique and interesting and different. And 21 years later, here we are. We're now a mammoth company of, I think we're at 16 or 17 full-time employees. We're huge. There's 4 of us in the United States. I cover the whole Western United States. Even though I live in Northern California, I cover Colorado all the way to Hawaii and up to Alaska. So we're still a small independent company, but our roots, we still believe in those same things we did when John started the company 21 years ago. We're here to make the world of Scotch whiskey a more interesting place. That's our mission statement. So what you'll see behind me up here, this is our range of core whiskeys that we make on a regular basis. And then some of you that are familiar with Compass Box will know about the limited edition, the one-off production runs we do of some quite expensive but very highly sought after whiskeys. And that'll be some of these whiskeys on this shelf down here. But yeah, just to clear up, we are not a distillery. We do not distill. If we had a still, we'd probably blow the place up. I think there's only one person in the company who knows how to operate a still. I don't think she's ever actually done it. She's never actually done it, but she's got the qualifications to do it. But no, so we're a blending house. So what we do is we buy aged whiskies from different distilleries around Scotland, and we'll usually blend about a handful of them, somewhere between like 3 and 6 whiskies. And then this bit's really important, is that we always age our blends. After we've blended all the whiskeys in a big vat, we'll always put that blend, that liquid, back into different barrels. And we do that for 2 reasons. Number one, we do it to let all the flavors marry. The best analogy I can use here is, I'm sure everybody here has cooked chili before, right? Chili's better a week after you've cooked it when you take it right off the stove. Mm-hmm. The same thing with blending whiskey, right? You let all those different components marry and blend and become like one complex product, rather than 5 or 6 different things, being like, hey, I'm the beef, hey, I'm the tomatoes, I'm the jalapeno, look at me. Now you've just got chili. So we do it to let everything marry. And then, as you'll see with the first whiskey we're going to taste, which is the Spice Tree, we can also affect the flavor of the whiskey, but the type of barrels that we use. We're as well as being blenders, we're also wood nerds at Compass Box. We've done a lot of work on the different types of oak that can be used in whiskey and how that affects the flavor profile of the whiskey and so forth like that. And this is probably a good segue to kind of jump right in. So the 3 whiskeys we're going to be tasting tonight are these 3 whiskeys up here in the middle. So the Spice Tree, the Story of the Spaniard, and the Peat Monster. Now, these 3 whiskeys are all in the gift pack that you guys got. So these are all blended malts. Okay, so what a blended malt is, it just means it's a blend of single malts from more than one distillery. Okay, so some of the other whiskeys we produce, the Artist Blend and the Glasgow Blend, those are blended scotches, which means it's a blend of malt whiskey and grain whiskey from different distilleries blended together. And then this one right here, Hedonism, which is actually the original Compass Box whiskey, that is basically the world's only blended grain Scotch whiskey, which means it's grain whiskey, just grain whiskey, but from multiple distilleries blended together. So the word blend literally comes from more than one distillery. So it could come from 40 distilleries, it could come from 2 distilleries, but that's literally all that the word blend means. So I know there's a big negative connotation about that word in Scotch whiskey, but there's a lot of education I think needs to be done around that to get people kind of past that word and to actually understand, you know, the purpose behind blending. And we look at blending as a creative aspect rather than just a way of, you know, being able to make, you know, 40 million cases of whiskey a year or so forth like that. We look at blending as a platform for creativity, basically, and that's what we do. So let's jump in with whiskey number 1, folks. So this will be, we're going to do the Spice Tree first, and then we'll do the Story of the Spaniard second, and then we'll do, so yes, exactly, Jeremy. Yep. So this little part of the label right here, the tree in the middle. So the Spice Tree. Why would you call a whiskey the Spice Tree? So the whole idea of this whiskey, and this was well, basically an illegal whiskey when we first launched it back in 2005. But so the idea of this whiskey was we wanted to blend malt whiskies in French oak. Now, the majority of Scotch whiskey, about 90% of all Scotch whiskey, is aged in ex-bourbon barrels, American oak, which has been used to make bourbon once, right? Bourbon can only be aged in brand new barrels, virgin barrels. So once you've aged some bourbon in a barrel, you cannot use that barrel to make bourbon again. But those barrels are expensive. They cost about, you know, $600, $700, $800 a piece, you know, brand new. So if you're, you know, Four Roses or Buffalo Trace or what's the turkey? Wild Turkey, or, you know, any one of these, you know, massive companies, you don't just throw those barrels out after you've used them, you sell them. And the majority of them get sold to the Scotch whiskey makers, also get sold to the tequila producers and to the rum producers in general. Nearly all tequila and rum is aged in ex-bourbon barrels, as is 90% of all Scotch whiskey. So, but the Spice Tree, what we wanted to do is to say French oak will give you a different flavor profile than American oak. So American oak will give you these lovely creamy, buttery, brown sugar, more like vanilla kind of flavors, those types of flavors. Whereas French oak, the particular type of French oak that we use in this whiskey, will give you more baking spice flavors. So like clove, ginger, cinnamon, maybe even a little bit of tarragon as well. Don't ask me why, I've never licked a tree. There's 1,000 different species of oak out there. And so, yeah, this particular type of oak from France and the way that we toast the insides of the barrels will give you those types of flavor profiles. So the Spice Tree is actually a blend of 3 Highland single malts. It's all been aged in ex-bourbon barrels. Then we blend those whiskeys together. Then we put that blend in these new French oak barrels that we've created, and we age that blend for an additional 2 years in new French oak, and it's brand new French oak. The first time, you know, a barrel's been used, it's got a lot of flavor to impart into that liquid. And then the second time that barrel's been used, it's a little bit less, and, you know, the third time a little bit less. And by the time that barrel's been used 4 or 5 times, it's basically just a holding vessel. It's not going to impart much flavor into the liquid. So I love Spice Tree. I mean, really get your nose in on Spice Tree, nose in there, and you know, try to pick up those, I say, like ginger, clove, cinnamon type flavor profiles. It's this is a whiskey that I find wine lovers love this whiskey. There's just such a rich, deep nose to it. And then on the palate, you get that lovely, juicy maltiness, but then you almost kind of get like a rye whiskey finish to it in a way. That spice kind of kicks in on the back end.
You know, it's funny. This was actually the first whiskey I tried when I got to meet John in about 2010 or 11. And I remember just him, you know, describing how was the process and everything, and then me tasting and being like, I didn't know Scotch could do this, especially blended Scotch, because as you were saying earlier, you know, only in the last 10 years or so as people started realizing that, you know, you can actually make an artist forward blend on something like Scotch, where you're actually putting in some effort, where before people just thought like, oh, you're just blending a bunch of stuff together and putting it in a bottle, like you said, to make like as many bottles as you want, 400,000 cases or whatever it is. But yeah, I remember sitting down and just like, it was just funny. My eyes kind of like lit up, I guess, because John smiled after I tasted it. I was just like, I didn't know Scotch could taste like this.
No, I love it. Whenever I do like presentations in like, you know, bars or liquor stores, I love it when someone like tastes the whiskey and they go, you get like the head cock. They're like,
Yeah.
huh. You know, and yeah, it's great. But yeah, this whiskey, it's, as I say, it's if you think about it, it's so simple. In that lovely juicy malt whiskey, and then you think about putting those spice flavors on top of it. You know, we started doing this in 2005, and the original production method we did for Spice Tree was actually ruled illegal by the Scotch Whisky Association, which is the governing body of Scotch whisky, to make sure that everyone kind of sticks to the rules and you know, maintain the integrity of Scotch whisky. So we did a little workaround and so forth. But yeah, this whiskey, it's fantastic. I love Spice Tree. It's just delicious. It's yummy. It really is. It's a great fall whiskey, I find. You know, I mean, sorry, what was that?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you. I was just asking what was it that made it illegal, since it started in bourbon, ex-bourbon.
Yeah. So what made it illegal is the barrels that we use for that secondary aging originally, we used new French oak inner staves. So we basically created like a second skin on the inside of the barrel, which is done in the wine industry, very commonly done in the wine industry to age wines quicker, you know. But in the Scotch Whisky Association deems that we were basically messing with the integrity of a barrel. And so they told us not to do that anymore. So what we do now for the secondary aging is we actually take a used bourbon barrel and we put brand new French oak heads on that barrel. So yeah, we actually have the heads made at this cooperage in France to our specifications, and then they get shipped to Scotland. And then the coopers in Scotland, because these American oak barrels, they're broken down before they're shipped overseas. And then the coopers in Scotland, they'll put the barrels back together, but they'll put these brand new French oak heads on there for us. So this is a technique that we basically created back in about 2005. Now you're especially with the American single malt producers, which is kind of like the up and coming category of American whiskey right now. You're seeing a lot more experimentation with French oak, in particular in that category. But this literally was the original whiskey aged in French oak. I mean, this is where it started. So if you see another, you know, whiskey, this is aged in French oak and so forth. It's a nod of the cap to Spice Tree. It really is. There's a very well-known bourbon company out there that makes delicious bourbon and has like a second brand called Maker's Mark 46, which is original Maker's Mark finished in barrels that have French oak inner staves. And they were quite open about it when it came out. So like, yeah, we got the idea from Compass Box, but yeah, that's where the Maker's Mark 46 idea came from Spice Tree and so forth. So, but yeah, what do you guys think about this whiskey? Any like, you know, flavor profiles, tasting notes? What are you guys pulling out of the whiskey? Because everyone's palate's different. Instead of me telling you what you should taste, I'd love to hear what you guys are actually tasting.
So yeah, that's one of the things I really like about Compass Box is the names y'all have for these whiskeys are like properly set up. So like this Spice Tree like has a bunch of like baking spice notes, a lot of like appley notes to me as well. There's a little bit of citrus in there too. But yeah, just this really warming kind of vibrancy to it.
Yeah, so there's a question just popped up from and I don't have my glass on, Andrea and Jason. I think it says, is aged blended whiskeys, is it aged after blending or blend of aged whiskeys? So this Spice Tree is actually a little bit of both. So we're blending, they're about 10-year-old whiskeys when we blend them originally, and then we'll age that blend for another 2 years. Right, so normally with most of our whiskeys, you'll just take aged whiskeys and blend them. But we always do that aging period as well. But 2 years is the longest that we age or we marry our blends. And in this particular reason is to add that extra barrel flavor into the whiskey. Sometimes it's, as I say, it's just to let the different components marry and get to know each other. We don't really want to necessarily impart a whole lot more barrel flavor. But with the spice tree, it's all about that French oak, imparting it into those lovely Highland malt whiskeys that are in there beforehand. I particularly love making rye whiskey, classic rye whiskey cocktails with spice tree, like boulevardiers or sazeracs in particular. Excuse me. Because I say you just get that lovely fat, juicy maltiness, but then you get that rice spice in there as well. And it's a lot of fun to mess around with cocktails. But yeah, spice tree, I say it's a great kind of like fall kind of warming spice, kind of whiskey.
Yeah.
And retail price on pretty much the three whiskeys we're tasting, retail price on all of these whiskeys is somewhere between $65.99 to $69.99. They're all about the same price. So not cheap, but not expensive at the same point. We want people to drink our whiskeys. That's the idea. We actually want to share our whiskeys with the world and have people, be able to enjoy them. So, all right, everyone ready to move on to whiskey number 2?
So yeah, sorry, just to jump in on that with what Scott was saying. Yeah, so the 2 that we carry are the Spice Trees, the one we just had, and the Peat Monster. Those are the 2 we have in the 750s right now. And yeah, the Spice Tree comes in at $69.99 right now.
Perfect. So yeah, so whiskey number 2. This is the story of the Spaniard. I think on the gift set labels, it's just kind of got like the little wizard on it. Yeah, there you go.
The book, yeah.
Look for Gandalf. Right. And so the story of the Spaniard, this whiskey is, I was going to say it's the newest addition to our core lineup, but I'm going to touch on that later on. This whiskey's only been out since 2018. So it's fairly new to our core lineup. But the whole idea of the story of the Spaniard is we wanted to make a blend of malt whiskeys, a blended malt, but from whiskeys that have been aged in used Spanish wine casks. Now, sherry counts as a type of Spanish wine, but there's a lot of whiskeys out there, single malts and blends that are aged in used sherry casks. Macallan being the poster child of it, Dalmore, Aberlour, Glendronach, some other fairly well-known single malt producers, who make some fantastic whiskeys. But we're not in the business of making whiskey like everyone else's whiskey. We're in the business of doing something unique and different and trying to push the envelope a little bit on what whiskey can be at Compass Box. So we didn't just want to make a blend of whiskeys that have been aged in used sherry casks. But in the story of the Spaniard in here, you've also got some whiskeys that have been aged in used Spanish red wine casks as well. And I actually forgot to mention earlier on, ever since the beginning of Compass Box, one of our core founding principles has been transparency in everything we do. So if you're interested, if you want to know the whiskeys that are in these blends, if you think I'm talking BS and you want to be like, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about, I'm going to go find out what's in these whiskeys. The recipes are on our website. If you go to the product page, you'll see a download fact sheet. And in there, there'll be you'll basically see this wheel at the bottom. And it will give you the names of the distilleries, the percentage of each whiskey in the blend, the type of barrel that whiskey's been aged in, and then even an explanation of the flavor profiles that each whiskey is bringing. And if you were a smart enough person, you may think that if you counted the tree rings out from the center of the diagram, that might give you an idea on the age of each component whiskey. Due to laws around Scotch whiskey, I can neither confirm nor deny that that is true, because we're only allowed to market the age of the youngest whiskey. But it's possible it could be true. It's possible. So anyway, getting back to the story of the Spaniard. Yes, so this whiskey is all malt whiskeys from different distilleries. Around about 50% of the whiskey in here has been aged in used sherry casks, and around about 25% has been aged in Spanish red wine casks. So a sherry cask is going to bring sherry flavors to the liquid that's in it. So you're going to get like dried fruit and nutty flavors from it. But a Spanish red wine cask, same principle, is going to bring some of those red wine characteristics. So you're going to kind of get like those more like red fruits, those red berry fruits kind of coming to the forefront as well. So it's nice. I like sherry whiskeys, but the addition of those red fruits into this whiskey just kind of lifts it a little bit for me, you know, and just kind of, I heard a right there, which is, that's fantastic. That basically means, as far as I'm concerned, that means we're doing a good job.
Mm.
Holy moly.
That was awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
So far, I like this one better, maybe because of the wine-ish taste or something. I don't know.
Yeah, there's no right or wrong to any
Yeah.
of this. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's fun about this. We create so many different flavor profiles of Scotch whiskey. Everything from the lights to the big, heavily peated whiskeys, that there's something in there for everybody. You know, there's no one can ever tell you this whiskey's better than that whiskey. It's you know, if there's 40 judges in the room and 35 of them vote for the whiskey, then sure, but your palate is your palate, you know, and you like what you like. That's
I think this is a little bit more elegant than the first one. The first
Sure.
one was really hot, hot ending. I don't know how else to say it.
Spicy.
Very spicy.
Yeah.
But this is mellower,
Mhm.
but more elegant.
I got you. Yeah, and I mentioned someone on there like Black Forest cake, cherries and chocolate. I love Black Forest Gatto. I love that. But yeah, I think that's a great descriptor. I think so for sure.
And it's just fun to see the two differences of the spice tree and the story of the Spaniard. You know, like the Spaniard definitely has more of those kind of, or sorry, the spice tree definitely has more of the spice vibrancy to it. This one has a little bit more rounded mouthfeel to it, a little bit more darker fruit, or fruit notes more kind of rest on the mouth, or sorry, on the palate. And yeah, it's a nice layering effect on this one for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they're both, I love both of them, but for different reasons.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get asked all the time, what's your favorite Compass Box whiskey? I hate that question. Because in 5 minutes, it might change.
And while y'all enjoy this, I'm just going to do a quick screen share to show y'all what it looks like for the Compass Box on their website. Because yeah, as Scott was saying, they have this stuff available just for you to look at. So this is like their fact sheet for the spice tree. Just literally has everything up here for you. Gives you the awards as well. And then this was the diagram he was speaking of.
This is the recipe wheel. Yes.
Yes.
So you can see in there the whiskeys that are in. Now the spice tree in particular, you'll notice a lot of the components in there will say Highland malt blend. That is pretty much our proprietary blend that we use in quite a few whiskeys. And we'll tell you what it is. I think at the bottom of that diagram even tells you what is in the Highland malt blend. I think in that really small writing down there at the bottom, it tells you what it is. But yeah, that is the recipe for the whiskey. I mean, if you can source the same whiskeys we do and get hold of the same types of barrels, you can make.
Oh, sure.
Make Compass Box at home.
Right?
Yeah, all right.
Yeah. But they have the sheets. Sorry, I was just saying, they have the sheets for all of them. They have the story of the Spaniard, they have the Peat Monster, all their specialty releases as well. So there's a little bit of everything. I mean, they give you all the information. The transparency with them is really cool because you don't see that a whole lot with a lot of whiskey companies, whether blending whiskeys, single malt whiskeys, even American whiskeys. Like when you talk about the mash bill, usually it's like a top secret, only 4 people know about it, and then it gets passed on through the generation. So it's really cool, the transparency that Compass Box has.
Yeah, we believed in that from day one. We're proud of the whiskeys that we use in our blend. We're not trying to hide anything from anybody. We're proud of what we do, and we also believe you should know what you're putting in your body. And if you find a component in there that you find is really interesting, then you may want to go seek out more of that distillery's whiskeys and be like, I really like that particular component in that whiskey. Man, that's a distillery I've never heard of before. Maybe I want to go kind of educate myself a little bit on that and try and drink more of those whiskeys as well. So it's from day one, we've been more than happy to tell you everything about what we do at Compass Box.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember the first.
Everyone ready to get their big boy pants on now? So, all right. So, whiskey number 3 in the box is the Peat Monster. It's going to have this guy in the middle. I think Jeremy, if you want to hold that one up to the camera, make sure.
Got your little monster.
I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's the one that's got the monster on there.
Again, very well named by Compass Box, and the art goes with it.
So the Peat Monster, so this, pretty much does what it says on the label. I'm presuming everyone on here knows what peated whiskey is when it comes to Scotch. If you don't, I'll just kind of 30 seconds go over that. So before people had gas and electricity, and wood was how we cooked and kept everything, kept ourselves warm and so forth. But there's this one parts of Scotland where it's quite windy and so forth, and there's not a whole lot of trees around there. And one particular island off the southwest coast of Scotland called Islay, Islay is how it's spelt. And if you're ever lucky enough to go there, and I highly, highly recommend it, it's a magical place. And it's this windswept island. There's no trees. So if you don't have wood, if you go back a few hundred years, if you didn't have wood and you certainly didn't have electricity or gas or any of these other modern ways of heating your home or cooking your food, how did you stay alive? And man, being the ingenious being that we are, we figured out that you can dig up these peat bogs. A peat bog, basically, it's like about 5,000 years of decomposed matter. You can dig up parts of it, and if you let it dry out, then you can set fire to it. And people still to this day in Islay will use like bricks of peat in their fireplaces in their houses and stuff like this. But anyway, when you're making malt whiskey, a part of the malting process is to take the harvested barley, you make it damp, you leave it in a warm room, and it almost starts to germinate again. And what is basically happening there is the sugars are converting into a form of, the sugars are basically breaking down into a form in which the yeast can then turn that sugar into alcohol. If you just took harvested barley and threw it in a tub with some water and some yeast, the yeast wouldn't be able to break down the sugars in the barley. So you need to create this enzyme that breaks the sugars down, where then you can ferment it and then distill it and so forth like that. So, but once that barley has literally just kind of starting to germinate, that's when you want to stop it, because you don't want it to germinate, because then it will use all the sugar up and then there's nothing left that you can turn into alcohol. So the way to stop it is you cook it. And going back, 150 odd years ago, peat was your fuel source. So you would basically put that wet barley on a grate, and you would set a peat fire down below it. And not only would it cook the barley, but it would also infuse the barley with this wonderful smoke flavor. And then you go ahead and ferment and distill that barley from there. And that's how you get that smoky flavor profile of Scotch whiskey, which is unique. There's no other spirit, before mezcal came along, 15, 20 years ago, there was no other spirit category that had anything like that smoky flavor profile. And so still today, it's still a small part of the industry. There's about over 100 malt distilleries in Scotland, and there's still only about 9 or 10 of them that make peated whiskey as their core item. So it still accounts for less than 10% of the industry's production. But it's just such a fascinating flavor profile that you get, as I say, and it's just unique. It really is. So the Peat Monster has been around since about 2005. And it actually started out as there's a liquor store in New York City. I think it's Park Avenue Liquors. And this is when Compass Box was still I think there were 2 people in the company. And anyway, the liquor store, they met John and loved what John was doing. And they requested that John made a big peaty blend just for that store to sell. So John made, he made a blend of peated whiskeys, and he sent it over to them. And I said, it's good, John, but more peat, ramp it up for us. He kind of beefed it up a little bit more, made it peatier, and sent them a sample. It's good, keep going, John. So we sent them a 3rd sample, sent them a 4th sample, sent them a 5th sample. They tasted it and they said, that's it. That thing's a monster. So that's how the original, I think it was about like 160 cases of whiskey or something like this. And it was all went to this one liquor store in New York City, and it was sold as the Monster. And it sold so well that once it sold through, John wrote to them, or probably wrote to them, I don't know if we had email back in 2004, maybe just about right. And basically said, hey guys, do you mind if we sell this whiskey on a regular basis? And they said, no, John, go for it. But to differentiate it from their whiskey, we called it the Peat Monster instead of the Monster. That's how the name came about. But it's a bit of a misnomer, because the intention was never to make the peatiest whiskey in the world. Right, as blenders, we still want to make something that's balanced and approachable and easy to drink. You know, we're not trying to blow the roof of your mouth off here with this whiskey, but you're dealing with very, very powerful whiskeys. So it's, you know, the name is a bit of a misnomer. It's not as scary as it sounds. You'll see this particular, if you see a bottle of whiskey with this label on it, this is the new recipe that we came out with in 2019, where we kind of gave it a bit of a facelift from the previous recipe, which we'd been making for about 15 years. We just kind of, you know, refreshed it and so forth. But this is now basically, and you can see on the website, it's basically 2/3 whiskey from the Kalila distillery on Islay, and about 1/3 Lefroy. Now, Kalila is, and we use Kalila quite a lot. Kalila is by far the fruitiest of those peated distilleries. And Lefroy on polar opposite is known for having this like doctor's office kind of iodine flavor to it. I mean, it's, you know, if you ever broke into your parents' liquor closet when you were 16 and had a swig of his bottle of scotch and it was, you know, a bottle of Lefroy, that's the reason you never drank scotch for the next 20 years. Right?
Oh yeah. I've heard that story multiple times too from people where it's just like, oh yeah, like, you know, my first one, actually our wine warehouse sales rep, that's one of his. He's like, the first scotch I had was just a super heavy Lefroy again. He's like, it threw me off for so long. I thought all scotches were like that until he found, you know,
I mean, that's literally the equivalent of like your parent like teaching to swim by throwing you in the middle of the North Atlantic. You know? And then like, hey, you want to go to the swimming pool? It's like, no, swimming sucks. You know. So, but no, that's what's so wonderful about Scotch is there is such a wide variety of flavor profiles, you know, and as blenders, it just gives us more colors to paint with. That's really it, you know, more tools, whatever way you want to look at it, you know. And what I find, I really do, I like this whiskey a lot. And by the way, if anyone makes cocktails at home, try making an old fashioned with this whiskey. I kid you not, it is spectacular.
That's what my question was going to be. What kind of cocktail would you make with each of the three different whiskeys?
Sure. Well, I mean, for me personally, I make Boulevardiers with Spice Tree.
Yeah.
Another Boulevardier, basically a whiskey Negroni.
Okay.
Just, you know, like Campari and sweet vermouth.
Equal parts, yeah.
Yeah. The story of the Spaniard is really, really good. But try a whiskey sour with the story of the Spaniard. Right. And if you can make a New York sour, it's a whiskey sour that has a little bit of a red wine float on top. Just pour a little bit of red wine over the back of a spoon over the top of the cocktail. That's fantastic. And yeah, Peat Monster Old Fashions. And you'd never think about making an old fashioned with this big smoky peaty whiskey. It's so good. It is so good.
Okay.
Those are my three personal favorites, but don't take it from me. Experiment, have some fun, play around at home. You know, that's the whole thing about whiskey. It's, I mean, that's just what I like. Right? I'm just one person. You know, you might try one of those whiskeys and be like, that sucks. I got a much better recipe. And that's, have at it, go at it, guys.
And
sure.
John, I like you know a lot about the oily kind of mouthfeel that this has, because yeah, there's that kind of nice, like you get that big smoke up front, but then that oily kind of texture on the palate definitely lightens that up. Yeah.
It's very creamy, this whiskey. It's even though it's peaty, but if you kind of, you know, like the Wizard of Oz, look behind the curtain of that peat smoke. And there's a lot of creaminess and there's a lot of fruitiness back there as well. So the two whiskeys in there, you know, the Lefroy and the Kalila are both H&X bourbon barrels. That's where you get a lot of that creaminess from, comes from those barrels. And I mean, I think this whiskey really is a tribute to the art of blending, because you're taking such powerful whiskeys and you just put them together in such a way. And there's literally just two whiskeys in there. There's a dash of essentially Spice Tree in there, like 1% of Spice Tree. So this is literally just two whiskeys. But if you get the proportions absolutely right, they work together so well. And in a way that this whiskey isn't aggressive. It's quite easy to drink. Even though it's a big, powerful flavor, it's not attacking the insides of your mouth. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And I mean, a big part of that is the marrying process, letting the whiskeys get to know each other and becoming like one complex whiskey rather than a couple of disparate whiskeys kind of vying for your attention. Another thing we do at Compass Box is non-chill filtering. So the industry standard is chill filtering, where basically before you bottle a whiskey, you will reduce the temperature down to almost freezing. And what that means that all the oils and the solids will basically coagulate in the whiskey. Then you run it through a filter and you will get all the, as I say, like the oils and the solids out of the whiskey, so that the whiskey would never go cloudy, or there would never be, you know, if you held the bottle of whiskey up to the light, it looks beautiful and clear and shining. But the oils are the good stuff. The oil, think of the oils as the fat on a piece of bacon. Right? If you cut the fat off that piece of bacon, it will still taste good. It's bacon. It's going to taste good regardless of what you do. Right? But it's so much better with that fattiness on there, right? Mm-hmm. So what non-chill filtering is, it's exactly the same process, but you just don't lower the temperature of the whiskey before you run it through the filter. So all the solids get extracted, but the oils, the fatty acids, make it through. And that what kind of gives you that like lovely mouthfeel, that more kind of like textured mouthfeel that would kind of coat your cheeks and so forth. Mm-hmm. That's non-chill filtering. So we non-chill filter all of our whiskeys. We don't add caramel color into any of our whiskeys. So the color of all of our whiskeys is the natural color of the whiskey. If you look at, I mean, just take Spice Tree and Peat Monster. Look at the colors of those two whiskeys, right? You would think that the Spice Tree is much, much older than the Peat Monster, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
They're essentially the same age. They're essentially the same age. You know, there are a lot of producers out there who would add some caramel coloring to the Peat Monster to make it a little bit darker and make you think that the whiskey is older. Mm-hmm. And therefore, if you think the whiskey is older, therefore they can charge you more money for it. We don't do that because we essentially tell you how old the whiskey is on our website. So that's two things, you know, again, it's just our you know, belief in transparency and honesty and integrity above all else. So those are the three whiskeys in our malt collection. Now, the reason I wanted to run out to the mailbox right before we started this tasting is we are just about to, on October 1st, we're going to release a new addition to our core lineup, a new blended malt. And I kid you not, my boss lives in Connecticut, and our stuff gets shipped into the port in New York and New Jersey. And he picked these bottles up. They literally arrived like a couple of days ago, and he just picked them up and mailed one out to me today. So October 1st, you are going to start seeing this bottle start hitting shelves. So this is called Orchard House. And I haven't even cracked this bottle yet. I haven't even tried this whiskey myself. But this is going to start hitting shelves October 1st. We're releasing this across the country. It's going to be a new part of it's blended malt. It's going to essentially be the bookend to Peat Monster. And it's a lighter, fruitier style of liquid. It's a little bit younger. It's going to retail for about $49.99. And what's fantastic about this whiskey is that it's composed of pretty much whiskeys that we have aged ourselves from the moment they came off the still. So with all these other whiskeys, we've relied on these distilleries to send us a 8-year-old whiskey or a 10-year-old whiskey aged in a certain type of barrel. And we will still go through each one of those barrels and taste them to make sure the flavor profile fits what we're looking for. And then we'll select, you know, they might send us like, you know, 50 barrel samples, and we'll choose the 20 that we want or something from those barrel samples. What we started doing about 8 years ago is from the distilleries that we like to use, we basically went to them and said, hey, if we bring you these barrels that we've selected ourselves, can you fill them with new make spirit right off the still, and then we will control the aging process from day one. And this is basically the first whiskey that we have released that is made with just our whiskeys. So nice. I'm not going to teach you all and crack the bottle and drink it in front of you and tell you how delicious it is, because that would be just mean. I will crack it and drink it later on tonight though myself. But yeah, just if you can all hold on just a couple more weeks, October 1st, you're going to start seeing this hitting shelves. And as I say, it's going to be a more fragrant, sweet, balanced style of whiskey. So more the everyday drinker. And it's going to be lighter than the three whiskeys we tried tonight, more fruit oriented. It's light oak on it, so it's going to be a little bit more spirit driven, kind of like the Peat Monster was. You know, Spice Tree and Astoria of the Spaniard are all about oak, whereas the Peat Monster and this Orchard House are going to be a little bit more about the actual distillate, the spirit itself, and less about the wood and so forth like that. But yeah, as I say, this literally turned up in my mailbox. I can see my mailbox out my window right here from my office. And it literally turned up like 1 minute before we started this tasting. That's what I ran out to get for you guys. So,
awesome.
so yeah, we've started. I mean, the information about this whiskey is on our website. We've released it in the UK and in France and so forth like that. So you can check out the recipe on the website and so forth. And then we also, if anyone actually really likes the Peat Monster, we're going to have gift sets coming out over the Christmas time. It's going to come with 2 etched glasses with the Monster etched onto the glasses. And it'll be the same price as just a regular bottle of Peat Monster. And then we have a few new limited editions coming out between now and the end of the year as well. So just to kind of speak about these whiskeys, including Orchard House. As I say, like these whiskeys are available all year round. So yeah, we make them on, several times a year and so forth. And then our limited edition whiskeys, like these ones down here, they're basically one-off batches of whiskeys that we were able to, get like a small parcel of this whiskey from this distillery, but not enough to, we couldn't do it on a regular basis. And we make like a one-off batch of whiskey and we bottle it and we sell it. And once it's gone, it's gone. And we couldn't physically reproduce it again if we wanted to, because we couldn't get our hands on some of those component whiskeys that are in there as well. So the limited editions, we have a new one called Canvas that will be hitting the stores about the same time as Orchard House in like a week or two. And then in November, if you're a fan of peated whiskey, if you're a fan of Peat Monster, you might have heard of whiskeys we've released called No Name. We've done No Name, and then No Name 2 came out a couple of years ago. Then No Name 3 is coming out in November again. And our No Name whiskeys are all heavily peated whiskeys. They're more heavily peated than Peat Monster. So if you're a fan of those big peated whiskeys, if you love an Ardmore, an Octomore, a Lefroy, a Lagavulin, these types of whiskeys, then the No Names are going to be right down your alley. And No Name 3, which is going to be the last one, because all good things should come in trilogies and should not be started up again and have prequel trilogies and sequel trilogies. Nonsense. So No Name 3 is going to be the last in our No Name collection. So yeah, that will be coming out later on this year as well.
Oh.
So yeah, that's basically what we do about Compass Box. We're just I say we refer to ourselves as a boutique Scotch whiskey blending house that we use blending as a platform for creativity, and we're just here to make the world of Scotch a more interesting place. Essentially, that's what we do. And yeah, we're still a small, independent little blending house, and we have a lot of fun doing what we do. And we hope that we can kind of open people's eyes a little bit to just different flavor profiles, something that's unique and interesting, and just kind of makes you think a little bit rather than just being obvious whiskeys. So did anyone have any questions on any of this? I know I just blabbered on for about 10 minutes there, but
I didn't have a question, but I used to drink whiskey years ago, and then I got into wine, and I hadn't had any in a very long time. My brother, on the other hand, has made a little bit himself and all that. But so that's why I asked you about the cocktails, because if I want to get back into whiskey, this is just kind of like heavy when you're used to just drinking wine. And
Sure.
So that's why I was asking about that I could blend some things and just maybe get back into drinking some whiskey that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's it's however you want to drink. For some reason, only around Scotch whiskey, people can't wait to tell you how to drink your whiskey. Don't drink it like this. You can't do that, and so forth like that. And it's nonsense. It's rubbish. It's your palate. If you want to put it in a cocktail, put it in a cocktail. If you want to put in an ice cube, put an ice cube on it to dilute it a little bit and kind of tone it down and so forth like that. It's your whiskey. It's your palate. You do it however you like. So yeah, I mean, honestly, my best suggestion would just be like experiment a little bit. Is there a particular cocktail you like? Maybe try substituting one of these scotches for whatever the other spirit would be, or something along those lines. When I'm lazy, I'll literally just throw honestly, any one of those whiskeys and some sweet vermouth in the glass and just stir it around a rock and just drink it. I mean, it's, just a quick, easy Scotch Manhattan or Rob Roy, if you will. It's but yeah, just play around, have some fun, experiment. I mean, that's honestly what we do at Compass Box. Is most of the whiskeys, the blends we come up with, our blending room is actually in London, and it's the world's coolest science lab. It's these whiskey samples and test tubes and vials, and we build our recipes in 100 ml test tubes. And there's basically there's a team of 4 people, our 3 whiskey makers and our production manager, and they will, you know, sit around and analyze them and be like, hey, maybe a little bit more of this, maybe a little bit less of that, and so forth. And we'll just kind of remake the blend and taste it and see where it goes, and just kind of go down the rabbit hole sometimes. And that's kind of how it's come to be. You know, it's I mean, sometimes we'll have an idea on what, you know, where we're trying to get to, and then maybe on the path there we'll just veer off and end up going in a completely different direction with a blend, you know. But we'll only put something in a bottle and sell it if we think it's compelling. Yeah.
I just had the image of like just stacks of notebooks of like, oh no, okay, like a third of this and 1/4, and then like changing it up, being like, oh no, let's put 2/3 of this, and then we got to do this. Just like stacks of books and books of like different experimental ones that didn't work and ones that might have worked, but you know, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot more that didn't work than did work. I mean, for some of our whiskeys, they might go through like 40, 50 different iterations before we get it to where we think that's it. That's spectacular. We love that. You know, it's just a process, you know, and it's the creative process. It's just that whiskey is our medium, basically.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, you know, a band writing a song that, you know, no one ever sat down and just wrote a perfect song straight off the bat. You know, I mean, they sat there and they worked at it for weeks and weeks and weeks and so forth. And that's kind of, you know, what we do at Compass Box.
So
Awesome.
why do you blend in London and not in Scotland?
So the actual production is done in Scotland.
Oh, okay, okay.
Legally, it has to be, because
Mhm.
Scotch whiskey has to be aged and
That's what I would
still
think,
aged
yeah.
in Scotland. Our office is in London because that's
Oh,
where
your
John that's where John Glazer lives.
Okay,
And so we'll you know, make the recipe for the whiskey we'll design the recipe in London, and then everything, all the actual production gets done in Scotland.
got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I mean, as soon as one of those barrels of whiskey crosses over the border into England, that's no longer Scotch whiskey. Even if it went right back to Scotland 5 minutes later, at that point it's just whiskey. It's no longer Scotch.
Wow. Huh.
Them's the rules.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you so much for coming to join us tonight. You know, really appreciate your time. Thank you for all the information. For all y'all who joined us, I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with us on a Friday night. Hope you learned something about not just blending whiskey, but just Compass Box as a whole. You know how, again, I'm very excited to work with this company again, because it was one of the first Scotch companies that had me like open my eyes and realize that it wasn't just the standard, you know, big smoky one that I accidentally had one time when I asked someone like, oh, let me try Scotch. So, you know, and to see the work that they put into it with using the different states, figuring out what works. And, you know, as Scott said, there's hundreds of recipes that get tried before one gets made. So the effort that they put into it, I hope you all appreciate it and can taste it in what they're making. And, you know, we're gonna go a little old school than we usually do for this. So you all used to go to tastings a lot, and we give 10% off bottles that were at the tasting. So since we do carry the Spice Tree and the Story of the Spaniard in store now, and I will bring in the Peat Monster for those who ask it. But if anybody would like to purchase any of these bottles in the 750 form, we'll give you 10% off for it. And then we are going to bring in the Orchard House as well. So if you're interested in that, let me know, and I can set you up, then get you 10% off that as well.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah, and yeah, there are tasting notes on Orchard House on the website. As I say, I just don't want to be that guy that cracks a bottle in front of you 2 weeks before you'll even be able to get your hands on the shelf. Because even though I'm a Giants fan, and probably most of you are Dodgers fan, that's still messed up.
See, that's a civilized rivalry, though, my friend.
The
Yeah, there you
Dodgers
go,
lost,
see?
by the way.
Oh, shucks.
Sure.
It's about time you'd won 6 straight, so it was about time.
Awesome.
So-
Well, everybody, thank you so much. I will be editing this down just a little bit to cut off some of the beginning, and then I'll be editing it and putting it up on YouTube, but I will be sending you all the links. So basically, I'll just use the same link as I did for the Zoom this morning. If I need to resend it, just let me know. We'll also have it on the website. It will be on the Compass Box gift set one, and then I'll also do it for the individual Compass Boxes as well. So you can also just pop online to our website and find the link there if you can't find it in your email later on. But that will be next week I'll get that in. I'll try to get it done by like Tuesday or so for y'all. But no, again, Scott, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank
Enjoy
you.
your weekends, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep,
Yeah.
thanks,
And everybody
Scott.
else, thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for joining. Hope you had fun. Hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. And yeah, we'll see you around. Thanks,
Take care,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you.